Hello, and welcome to Storytelling for Business, the podcast that helps you build bigger, better, brilliant relationships with your customers by telling stories they want to hear. I'm investigating the power of storytelling to help you connect with your clients, build better business relationships, and lasso leads. I can't believe we've almost reached the end of season 3, and that means it's time for a toolkit. What's a toolkit? Well, in this episode, I'm pulling together the themes that emerged across all the conversations this season and summarising all the lessons we learned into a handy toolkit so you can put them into action in your business marketing. You're welcome. This season, my guests talked about creating understanding and empathy through storytelling, the courage it takes to share your own story honestly and vulnerably, how to notice when you're stuck in a story you didn't choose, empowering your audience by inviting them to co-create stories with you, recognizing the motivation behind your story and the legacy it will leave. It's a lot to cover, but don't panic because, as usual, I've got an acronym to help us remember everything. And this season, I'm keeping it super simple. S-T-O-R-Y. Story. Funny that. So, let's go. S is for self-awareness. Are you comfortable with the real you? Have you grown into your identity? I've got 3 great examples where my guests answered this question. Let's start with Louise Callin in episode 23, talking about how her mum's Alzheimer's has reframed her identity.
I didn't get my grades A-level. I messed it up. And I went to do a computing degree. As I have progressed through my career, actually caring about people, solving problems, teamwork, and actually trying to make a difference, it landed every day for me in my corporate world. What has become and what's emerged through my mum's experience and my own experience of being a carer, I've just changed those dynamics a bit. Actually, what really matters to me is how my 30 years of experience doing what I do can actually make a difference to people. I am so passionate about carers and people that do this as a job. They are the most under-celebrated group of people as far as I'm concerned. So if you are listening to this and you're a carer, thank you so much for what you do. You do an incredible job that is at times very stressful, very hard work. And I can promise you that 6 years ago, I had no idea just how important your role was. And now I do. So thank you.
In episode 26, Jada Nitzoli talked about how great it feels to express her personality in her 1980s vibe, but how she was initially worried. What would people think?
I only feel like my real self when I'm dressed 80s. So if someone, people can't hear me, I have a perm, I've got big loop earrings, I've got a pussy bow blouse, I'm wearing houndstooth pencil skirt, and I have shoulder pads in some of my outfits and so on. I got, full on 80s makeup and everything. And it just makes me feel like I'm expressing myself. And it took me a while, to be honest. Like, I think people who already know me and have been following me on LinkedIn might be surprised because I'm usually quite, I show up in videos and photos and everything. But it took me a while to feel comfortable with really bringing that, incorporating that into my business brand. I used to show up with more, I used to tone it down because I thought, people are not going to think I'm professional. People are going to think my strategies are outdated because I look like I'm from the 80s. I was like, you know what? I feel like myself when I'm, and I think it shows more because I feel confident. I feel happier. And a lot of people, when I show up on video calls, they tell me like, "Oh my God, you're glowing today." And I think that only happens when I'm dressed 80s. So I'm not gonna tone that down anymore.
Another guest who prefers not to tone it down is Lisa Ward from H2O Energy. She kicked off episode 25, laying it all out on the table.
My mother taught me how to turn a nickel into a quarter and make spaghetti last till Thursday. You know, the life's experiences is what qualifies us. And sometimes we think that if we don't have the best degree or the biggest job, that we can't do the most important things. And it's usually common sense or having conversations. And that's kind of one of the things about my story is that I'm not afraid to be an icebreaker. If you want to talk about it and you want to sit down and have that hard conversation, I'll have at it. I might not say the words as pretty as you. I might not be able to talk as fancy as the next guy, but I'll talk that truth. It's as flawed as it comes and as flawed as I am. If you'll have that conversation with me, how we can make this a better place for the next guy, I'm all in.
Jada, Louise and Lisa all showed up as fully themselves. They shared their stories of who they are, unapologetically, vulnerably, and really honestly. And that's so important if we want clients and potential clients to trust us. They need to see the real person, the true story behind the business. In episode 24, creative director Andy Greenhouse said the best way to achieve this is by using video, even if it's just you filming it yourself.
So if you're a small solopreneur business owner, or you're a CEO, you want people, or you're a coach, you want people to get to know you potentially. And video is like the easiest way to get to know somebody before you've met them. And you will, and if you both do it, there'll be something when you finally meet, there won't be this weird awkwardness because you already know each other, even if you haven't kind of had a call together, because you kind of, if you do it enough, you know, people do get to know you. So that was really part of the point of it as well, or it became the point of it. You know, it's much more about, well, if you haven't tried it, it is a really great way for people to understand you as a person.
Another way you can connect with an audience is, of course, in person. In episode 21, story spotters David Pullen and Sarah Jane McKechnie talked about having self-awareness when you're giving pitches and presentations.
In fact, we often, when we're working with people, and especially on a particular project, we have these three areas of presence, warmth, and power that we always sort of judge, or sort of, yes, we have a tick box. And it starts with, as I said earlier, the presence of, does this person look and sound as if they don't want to be anywhere else except right here, right now? And then it's the warmth. Do they look and sound as if they have taken the other person into consideration? And then and only then comes the power, which is, do I believe their values? Do I believe their system of belief? Do I believe what they're saying to me? And I think too often, going back to what we said earlier about people being time poor and sort of having KPIs and things like that to hit in business, we sort of go, I've just got to get all my power out without considering those two incredibly important bits of presence and, as you say, the warmth.
I mean, because that's what leadership is. It's bringing people with you. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? It's and we that's why we have to think about what we say in certain situations, and I suppose what we do is we help people understand the story that they're in any situation, and allow and give people the wherewithal to be able to decide, okay, how the easy ways of how we're going to tackle this now.
It's funny. I'm about to start a project next week with a big client, and they're working on a massive pitch for a piece of work. And I can almost guarantee that I'll walk in there on Tuesday morning and they present their first draft to me. It'll be something about they're going through their credentials and everything. And my first job will be saying, can you start by saying something that you've learned about them through all the site visits that you've been on? Just connect. Just show that you've been present and that you've listened and that you've understood.
So as well as having self-awareness, being comfortable in your own skin and owning your own story, you also need to be aware enough to understand that it's not all about you. You have to be yourself, but also think about who you're speaking to and what matters to them. This duality was emphasised perfectly by podcast creative Natalie Jameson in episode 22.
It all comes down to authenticity, because I think the way that I've always approached interviews is that it's never particularly been about me, because I've always been servicing like a different editorial agenda or working for somebody like the BBC or something else like that. And so it's trying to get out the story that best serves that audience and the things that I think people will be interested in hearing. And if you're always having that in the back of your head, whatever you say is always going to be different to the next person, because you're different from the next person. So I think really tap into kind of what interests you, what interests the sort of vision that you've got for whatever work or interview that you're trying to do. And hopefully you'll always get something refreshing and different from the next person.
That's a brilliant tip. And I do always say, who are you talking to? Who's your audience? But that's absolutely vital with whatever piece of content you're producing. Actually, if you're doing some kind of marketing or media production, if your audience isn't interested, then what's the point, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, when I first got into journalism and entertainment journalism specifically, it wasn't about me. It was always because I was really curious and wanted to share stories or films or TV shows or theatre shows or bands or music that I'd discovered that I really wanted other people to find out about as well. So then I could chat to them about it, because I was that geek that wanted to, oh my God, like something amazing happens in this film, in this particular scene. And I really want to chat to other people about it. And there's a really great recognition when you get that with an audience or with people where you feel like you've connected on some level. And it's an utter joy.
Love that. Authentic connection is, as Nat says, utter joy. And we all need as much joy in our lives as possible. Okay, S is done. Let's move on to the letter T, which stands for truth telling. In episode 27, Coach Supervisor Helen O'Grady talked about this, or rather, the opposite of truth telling. Here's Helen on the stories we tell ourselves, which often aren't true, and how much damage they can do.
The most common thing that I work with people around is self-belief and confidence and the inner critic. And that's whether I'm working directly with coaches, because I supervise coaches. So often that's a narrative around, am I a good enough coach? Would somebody else have done it better? What did I do wrong? Why has that client disappeared on me? That kind of stuff. And in leadership, again, I can't speak up at this meeting. I don't know how to performance manage this person. I'm struggling with, I work with quite a lot of social workers. I'm struggling with the families I'm working with because I'm intimidated by them, or I'm young and they're much older and I don't have children and they have children. And so that's very, very common. And often that is around the stories we tell ourselves. So, I often describe our protective voices that say, are you sure? You shouldn't be doing that. You're not good enough. That voice gets very loud. The voice that we tend not to use, that we use with other people, is, you've got this. Hang on, you know what you're talking about. You've got lots of experience. You're doing your best.
Yeah.
We're not comparing to somebody else. So like, for example, a junior doctor saying, I don't know what to do in this situation. We all have that. But actually internally we go, without even realizing, I should be doing this. I should.
That word should. Isn't that dangerous?
Yeah. I talk about, and that's what I'm often doing in coaching, is picking up people's language where they're not even hearing how they speak to themselves, which is, I should be doing this. I can't do it. I don't know that kind of stuff. I don't know whether that's a specific enough example, but I think that's brilliant. So common across everybody. And what I try and do as coaching is get underneath how do I speak in this meeting to what's the story that you're telling yourself and how can we change that story?
In episode 24, Andy Greenhouse talked about exactly this.
I've always been curious about my own brain because it never didn't really seem to work like other people's brains. So I would just kind of write stuff out, and I'm not very good at speaking, or this is the story I tell myself, right? I'm not good at speaking. So if ever that gets back into my head, then it will, like, it's right there now, that narrative, it's right there. I'm speaking to you.
Well, it can shush. You're doing very well.
And but writing, I could express myself.
Yeah.
I could express how I really feel. So, and, you know, I recognize that other people got something from that.
Andy is constantly looking for the truth about who he is. And he's recognized that his story, like a lot of ours, is constantly evolving.
If there's a part of you that feels like it hasn't finished something, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the end, and you know, you've closed the book on it. And I think it's really easy to think that it is. You know, it's really easy to think that, oh, I'm defined as the video guy, whatever. You know, I've got to continue doing that, and you know, reading or writing the story that was kind of accidentally written maybe along the way, and I can't change it. And actually, that's not the truth.
So we can change our own stories. But of course, the very act of holding space for ourselves, honestly, telling the truth, is vulnerable.
As somebody who can't do elevator pitches, especially when they're talking about themselves, because, I think what you touched on is a confusion, creative confusion, I guess I'm calling it right at this moment, because I think creativity generally, you don't have to define it, but in the business world, you do. And I guess over the years, I have defined myself as different things. And right now, I'm kind of in the mix of at the point of bringing everything together. So bringing, you know, my design background, my video, everything together. So I would say I try to be a creative all-rounder, I suppose, but that doesn't help people understand what you do. So I say I'm the video guy, you know?
Yeah.
Although that's just one part of it these days.
In episode 25, Lisa Ward opened up about the effect of this struggle to juggle different parts of her life.
I've had a lot of setbacks. You know, like I said, I even went through a potential after 40 years. I almost, lost a marriage, and my passions and the things that I did, it's all real. And I'm not afraid to talk about it. I don't want to bleed all over everybody, but we're not alone. We're not isolated. And if more people knew, there would be more, I think, sympathy and compassion, because we all go through the same struggles. And a lot of times it's pressure. It's the business pressure. It's the idea of what defines success. And I think that adds a lot to the table. And a lot of that burden, we carry that baggage with us. And I did it. I couldn't find my priorities because I wanted this and that. And as a woman, it's hard to have both, because there's more on us than them. That's just the truth. And we juggle more, and we want both this and that. So to have that, you work extra and you feel deeper and you hurt more.
You hurt more. It takes courage to display that much vulnerability and to be a truth teller to yourself as well as everyone else. But if you want to be trusted in business, those are the stories you need to tell. All right, on to the letter O, which stands for ownership. Owning the space you occupy. Giada Nizzoli from episode 26. Take it away.
So how I changed my business was by realizing what more can I do for my clients while still staying true to what I actually enjoy doing, like that sweet spot. And so that's when I realized that, okay, I need to give them some more help with the brand messaging. And then I actually need to help them get confident with getting the message out there consistently. And I actually love what you said about being a cheerleader, because I never thought of it in that specific way. But in a way, it kind of is like that, because as I said, now I mostly work with women, and something that a lot of them struggle with is actually promoting their services confidently without feeling icky, without feeling like they're doing something bad. And so that's how I got to this blend where like I give them clarity on their messaging, but also helping them feel like the one for their ideal clients, like helping them do this consistently until it becomes a habit and until it becomes normal, and then they don't need me anymore and they can keep doing that with the same motivation, with the same confidence and strategy for years to come, basically.
Promoting your services confidently without feeling icky. That is the essence of this letter O for ownership. Helen O'Grady in episode 27 talked about exactly this, getting over that ick of self-promotion.
I've really struggled with it. And, I had a business in Australia and I was lucky there. I had built up a network and I never really had to sell myself, if I'm honest. And then came over here and kind of started again and again. It was a massive reset. Really big reset. And it was always sort of on my to-do list, must get better at marketing, must market myself. And then kind of about 18 months ago, a big drop in public sector spending on things like coaching. And so I was like, I really need to start marketing myself. So I have been focused on it over the last year and I've really struggled with it because that notion of selling myself is just so alien, particularly from that background of nursing where it's like, you don't sell yourself, your worth is what it is, not particularly high, all of that kind of stuff. But you're a cog in the machine when you're a nurse,
aren't you? And you are the flipping machine when you're running your own business,
But like you, as you say, I am aware that people will buy when they know, like, and trust you. And the stories and being visible, they're never going to know you unless you're visible. So that first question is, how do you become visible? And that's kind of putting yourself out there. There's no getting away from it. And then that marketing, which I'm not sure whether that's the same in your area, but that notion around kind of having an ideal client and directly speaking the marketing to that particular person.
Okay, hold your horses, Helen. We'll get to who you're talking to in a minute, because I want to come back to this idea of putting yourself out there, having self-confidence, owning your space. And if you're confident in your skills, you're not afraid to let go a little and loosen up in your work, and that's very compelling. Natalie Jameson talked about this in episode 22. She's a podcast creative and entertainment journalist, and she was talking about doing interviews. Of course, she said, be prepared, but have the self-confidence to relax your expectations and loosen your ownership of the conversation.
Listening would be my key tip out of all of this. So the way that I've always conducted interviews and have always enjoyed doing them is that, of course, you plan, you prep, you have your questions, you have your areas, your topics you want to cover. But it kind of is irrelevant if you're not listening to what the person in front of you is saying, because they may just sort of drop something in your lap that you could never anticipate or expect. And you have to then be able to adapt and follow that lead, because chances are it's going to be way more interesting than what you had planned to do if you were kind of forcing a conversation or an interview down a certain way. So listening to people is always the best.
Love that. Listen to them, their story. Okay, this brings us nicely on to letter R for resonance. Storytelling for business is about finding and sharing stories that resonate with your ideal clients. I say at the start of this podcast, in every episode, it's about telling stories your clients want to hear. So let's see what this season's guest had to say about resonance. Here's story spotter David Pullen from episode 21.
The power of the story is that combination of, it's essentially a fact in context, which brings the fact to life. And there's so much written on everywhere about leadership and vulnerability, but what does that actually mean? And I think the act of storytelling is an act of vulnerability in itself, because you're letting people into your heart as well as your head. And you're risking that somebody might say, well, I don't agree with you, which is great, because then you're in a discussion.
It's a discussion. David said at the beginning of that clip, story is a fact in context, which brings that fact to life. Just let that sink in a bit. It's exactly what marketing mentor Giada Nizzoli said too in episode 26.
If we're sticking to facts and stats and things like that, we're not going to make that connection with our ideal client. But when we're like wrapping that, with packaging around the story, whether it's like, especially like their story, or if it's like elements of our own story that can feel relevant to them, or if it's part of the story of clients that we've already worked with that used to be in the same shoes and that actually overcame that problem and so on, that's going to make it so much easier for our ideal clients to really connect with that, stop their scrolling, and help them absorb our message because it's wrapped around that story, basically.
Did you hear that word, connect? That's what resonance is all about. Finding stories that resonate with your clients, connecting you to them with an invisible thread of empathy. Andy Greenhouse described it as getting under their skin.
Yeah, I mean, I am all about that, the emotional, the feels, and how you kind of reach somebody kind of under the skin. And it's not always easy, but I feel like I've always been quite an emotional person. So I recognize that people like me, so everybody has an emotional bed deep within. It just depends on how thick the skin is to get in there. Everyone can relate to something somebody is feeling, but they don't necessarily want to acknowledge it.
Let's look more closely at this idea of connection. Here's story spotter Sarah Jane McKechnie from episode 21, followed by her co-author of their book, The DNA of Engagement, David Pullen.
If you can connect and show that you understand, and you've heard, you've listened. I mean, all these things that allow space and connection, and then only then, when people are doing what you're doing now, which is nodding, it's that thing.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. This person understands me. It's such a basic human need. That then only then can you really have the right to say, but this is
introduce the nightmare.
Yes, exactly. This might not happen because, and give a reason. So it's. I think one of the things that's so important is to always remember that you have to care for your. And I'm going to use the word audience. And what I mean by audience is anybody, whether it's a toddler, whether it's 1,000 people in a hall, or whether it's your direct reports or whoever it is, is you absolutely have to care about how they're going to get this message, what their agenda is, and or what you can agree with that. Start with it.
I think it's interesting you said those two words, connection and understanding. I mean, connecting, and it's interesting. I mean, one of the things that we often think about is that this trust is built on understanding, and the understanding is twofold. I mean, we tend to trust those who we feel have understood us, who have connected with us.
Yes.
But we also trust things that we find it easy to understand, which is where storytelling comes in, because storytelling just puts everyone on the same page. They have a vivid picture of what things are going to look like. So being understood and making people understand are the basis of building trust, really.
This concept of building trust through mutual understanding is what's behind Louise Callin's business, Real Life Conversations. She's invented an app to help facilitate easy, stress-free chat between people with dementia and those caring for them.
That is, for me, what it's all about. Those stories, those moments, being able to unlock memories from storage. That's one of the things that I talk about. Sometimes we aren't able to tap into the things that someone with dementia does know because we can't go back there with them. And so there we are having wonderful conversations about, what's happened today or what's in your life. But where you said selfish earlier, it's like, great, but how am I going to actually turn the table and actually talk about something that mum wants to talk about? or your loved one with dementia. If you don't go back there with them, how can you, how do you do it? It's very, very difficult. And if you don't know that person's background, even more so.
Oh yeah, if you're not a close family member, if you are a nurse or a grandchild who does, or a great grandchild, or somebody who doesn't see them very often, that can be quite difficult, can't it, to make that connection?
Very, very difficult. And you pick on a brilliant point there. I think it's hard to have a conversation with someone with dementia. You have to have the ability to pivot quickly, because you just don't know where it's going to go. Because if they forget what they were saying, they'll then look at the table and go, oh, cup of tea, because they need a prompt, and the prompt will be whatever they can see in front of them, because they don't want to stop because they realize they were in flow. Well, not flow, but it's a very difficult thing to have a conversation. So the idea of a safe activity, an activity that helps someone with dementia go back in time to a place where perhaps they've got a lot more to say than if you just keep going back to yesterday, a story might emerge for you both that you had no idea would still be remembered. And you can honor that story. You can do something with it. You can take it with you. And you could tell someone else that story as well. So the idea of unlocking that is hugely important to me.
I love what Louise said about honouring the story, turning it into a legacy and telling it to someone else. David Pullen also talked about the power of co-creating stories. He described a big project that the story spotters took on, which ended up being the case study in their book.
We were doing this particular piece of work with Aviva, which under the leadership of Dame Amanda Blanc, when she was changing the strategy of the company, when she essentially said to her 200 top leaders, this is the strategy, we're slimming the company down in this way, this is the forward thinking, I can't do it myself, you have to make this happen. And there was a big piece of work that was led by Accenture about the strategy and what the leaders actually did mentally around that. When they suddenly realized, okay, that's one thing, but they then have to go out and have the conversations which get the 22,000 people at the time in the organization to lean in and go, oh yeah, I want to be part of that. So they brought us on board to create that part of the program about how do you get people essentially to be excited by the possibility and then also co-create the future, co-create the story, which is really important, actually. It's you can tell people stories, but if they add to it themselves and color the stories themselves, then they are more likely to buy into the story and make the story happen. So the book really is it's the journey of how we actually did that piece of work, plus tons of other stuff that we've done right throughout our careers with leaders, and that's what it is. And it's designed really as a guide to help people on the journey, people who have to have the conversations that build trust, which is the primary thing, which will drive engagement and therefore influence change, whether it's changing the direction of a company or changing your partner's mind about a restaurant that they don't want to go to.
We all know which restaurants we like best. Okay, chaps, we've reached the last letter of this toolkit, Y, which stands for your why. We're not going to connect with our clients if we're not super clear on why we do what we do. What's your motivation, your purpose, your legacy? In episode 25, Lisa Ward told us about her passionate belief in her business, H2O Energy, and her dream to turn abandoned coal mines into green energy power plants.
We evolve and we grow and we change and we adapt. And I think that the joke that people often say about me is I'm like a spider. I'm versatile. I can go in any direction, anytime. But I like to lean into the directions that have my passions, the things that matter the most to me. And oftentimes when I'm doing something or changing what I'm doing, because I have changed a lot of things throughout the course of my life, my passions have moved, not many of them, but the ones that have moved has been because my why has been big enough. And usually it always goes back to my children and my grandchildren, their future. You know, what is it that I can do that can make a difference to affect their future? And I've always had pretty much of a conviction that those before me fought really hard so I could have the things that I had when I was raising my kids. And so it's kind of like my pay it forward to the future to do my part here and now. And if I'm not real passionate about it, it's hard to embrace and stick with it. But if it's something that I believe in, I'll swim against the grain every time. You know, I will just go against the current and I'll stand by myself if I believe in it. And there's just a couple things out there that I really believe in. And I find little pockets in the world that I can insert myself to do those things. It's not very glamorous. I get down there and I grind with the rest of them. But it's where my passion is.
Louise Callan is equally passionate about her business, Real Life Conversations.
Dementia is a cruel disease. And to try and make sense of that, you know, this is my mum. This is somebody that I cherish. And knowing that I can do nothing to fix it is very difficult. Yeah. It's very difficult for a person like many of us are. I don't mean I'm unique, but for a person like me, it's very difficult to not just try and want to fix the problem. I can't fix the problem. I spend a lot of time with my mum. That's incredibly important to me, but I can't fix it. So in the absence of being able to fix it, I want to try and do something that makes a difference for her, for sure. But actually, as I've learned more and more about dementia and people with dementia, actually, what I love the idea of the most is being able to make everybody's day a little bit better, to be honest.
Making a difference. That's the why behind Louise and Lisa's stories. And let's get a final reminder from David Pullen about how to share your why in a way that will really resonate with the people you want to reach.
Breathe before you go into any situation, before you switch the Teams call on, before you walk through a room. Just think to yourself, how am I going to show up in this room? Who am I bringing into this space? Just show up as your best self. Connect. Don't put on, it's not about putting on an act, but it's about genuinely showing up with presence and warmth. And the warmth is the presence is looking and sounding like you don't want to be anywhere else except right here, right now in this moment.
Fully focused.
Focused, absolutely focused. And then the warmth is about showing that you've considered the other person, that what you are doing is not orientated towards yourself, but it is orientated towards the greater good or the other person or whatever it is. So quite simply, show up well, and then make the first thing that comes out of your mouth something that shows the other person that you have considered them.
It might be your story, but if you want them to really hear it, you need to make it about them. Let's give the last word to Natalie Jameson from episode 22. Not only was she super clear on her why she loves interviewing people as a journalist and podcaster, but she also had a very easy tip to help you figure out your client's why. If you want to know their story, just ask.
And that's why I love doing what I get to do, is that I am endlessly curious and always aware that people are way more interesting than I am. So that's what I want to uncover. I want to hear people's stories. I want to hear what's going on with their world. And, you know, that can inspire me then to do other things as well. But, you know, you won't know if you don't ask those questions.
We did it! Well done! The Season 3 Storytelling for Business Toolkit is complete. So, what did we learn? Don't worry, here's a quick reminder. This season's acronym is S.T.O.R.Y, STORY. S is for self-awareness. Know who you are and share your story. T is for truth-telling, the vulnerability of raw honesty, and the stories we tell ourselves which aren't true at all. O is for ownership. Own your space. Have self-confidence. Market your services proudly with stories, not facts and figures. R is for resonance. Listen, understand, connect. Show your ideal clients that you see them and their story matters to you. And why is for your why. What drives you? Share your purpose and your passion, and your story will be irresistible. I really hope today's toolkit will help you to remember and put into action the really useful takeaways from this season. A huge thanks to all my guests. Everyone's contact details are in the show notes. And of course, you'll find their full interviews in the Season 3 archive. So why not go back, watch and listen to the full thing, and you could check out Seasons 1 and 2 while you're at it. There's about 20 hours worth of storytelling for business wisdom in there, plus lots of me wittering on. If you've enjoyed the podcast, the guests, or indeed the wittering, please do let me know. And if you're looking for a host for your podcast or a voice artist to make your brand sound as good as it looks, you know where to find me. All my contact details are in the show notes too. Thank you so much for listening and watching. It's been a lot of fun. I'm not sure when I'll be back with more episodes, but if you subscribe, you won't miss it. For now, this has been Season 3 of Storytelling for Business. Until next time, goodbye.